Welcome to Wines to Find, episode 150. Our wines today are both Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc. We have the regular Kim Crawford Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc that everyone knows and loves, and we have the Illuminate, which is why we're here today. It is low alcohol and only 70 calories per serving. Our guest, which we'll get to in a few minutes, is Lee Elliot. And Lee works for Constellation Brands, the owner of these two labels. He's going to talk about these two wines, the demand for lower alcohol wines, and more with us. And as you guessed it, this is episode number 3 in our Fitting Wine into Your Lifestyle series. And we're here to answer and ask the question of you if sugar and low alcohol is important. And if you haven't even considered it, give you some things to think about.
Exactly right. Let's go ahead and jump right into wine number 1, which both of us have had. So we're breaking our tradition here because we wanted to be able to compare these two wines. So wine number 1 is the original Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc. So it is very pale yellow.
Pale
very pale, very pale. The nose, it smells citrusy and grassy. It's very intense. This one actually is one of my personal favorites. It's a great price point. So I already know I like this Sauvignon Blanc.
It's signature Marlborough Valley. So it's got that grapefruit scent, the acidity, and
it's got that
jumps.
Zippy raciness and good, fresh, crisp ripeness, and at a great price point. So
one of the most famous and well-known and most popular Sauvignon Blancs around.
Yeah, and then it tastes just like I thought it would. It's got that citrus, grapefruit flavor on the coming out,
and it tingles on the tongue. That acid just really dances right there on the forefront of the tongue. So again, it is a common wine. It's one that we've had. It's regular, and the reason why it's being tasted today is because they have come out with this Illuminate, which is the 70-calorie version, and it's low alcohol, and that's
right. And not only low alcohol but low sugar. Not low sugar category. It's considered low calorie, and that's kind of one of the benefits of this sector that we're going to hear from Lee about, is creating these wines that are low calorie. Sometimes they're touted as low alcohol. Sometimes they're touted as low sugar. This is low calorie. Let's go ahead and talk about the basics of how wine is created so that way we can identify the differences between these two. First, regular wine is fermented through a process of you have your yeast that is generally on your grapes, and the yeast all right, let's back up. All right, so you've got your grapes. You go and you harvest them when they're at a certain ripeness, so that way they're at a specific ripeness, whatever the winemaker ends up deciding, and that's called bricks. So they bring it into the winery, they crush it. Usually they have the yeast on the grape skins.
the natural yeast comes from the grapes.
Yes, and then sometimes some winemakers add yeast. It depends on what's needed. So that yeast then eats up the sugar.
There's little
those little micro things. Eats up the little sugar that is in that juice, and that is the fermentation. That's where once it eats it up, the result of eating it exhibits CO2. That little sparkly, the effervescence, that CO2 is then released. Heat is released, and that is then ethyl acetate.
And that is the alcohol.
That is what
the alcohol in the wine. When the fermentation is complete, when there is no more fermentable sugar left.
Correct.
Which
sometimes
means
it can get stuck. Sometimes they have to help it out.
Jiggle it along a little.
Wine always has some sort of little caveat to make it just a little bit unusual. But yes, that is the goal of fermentation, is to eat up all the sugar. That's
all, depending.
Yes, depending on the style of wine that they want to create.
And what is left in the process, if the winemaker chooses to leave any, that is called residual sugar.
Yep.
And you hear that a lot.
As RS, particularly whenever you look on a tech sheet.
So once the winemaking process is completed in the wine bottles, those total sugars are really not a lot. If there's residual sugar, it's generally minimal, but it becomes measured in grams per liter because they measure the wine by the liter.
Right. Well, this is 750. It's not quite a full liter because 1,000 milligrams is 1 liter. So
But
it's
they
just
measure
shy.
it by grams per liter.
Yes,
So the
yes.
measurement of sugar that is given on a wine bottle is grams per liter. And generally speaking, a dry wine is going to have 3 grams of sugar. If it's a medium wine, a little bit more residual sugar there is present, 3 to 9 grams. A sweet wine is going to have more than 33.75 grams of residual sugar. And that's how they qualify.
That
That's
is.
industry standard typically.
And just as a caveat, just so that you can get an idea for those Americans that are listening,
What the heck is a gram?
a gram, 4 grams of sugar is equivalent to about 1 teaspoon.
So in this bottle of wine that we're talking about, the regular one that's not being touted as low alcohol, low whatever, there's probably about
There's 3 grams of sugar in that one.
so less than 1 teaspoon
less
of
than
sugar.
in the whole bottle.
Whole bottle. So if you're having a glass, you're getting less than 1 teaspoon. So that's
Well,
really,
you could have the whole bottle and still get less than 1 teaspoon.
You could. You might not want to choose to do that. So since in the fermentation process, what the sugar gets burned off or eaten off and it converts to alcohol, then your concern is, well, how much alcohol is in that bottle? Alcohol by volume, or ABV, we've talked about it a lot, is what you're looking at that's the global standard of measurement for alcohol content. So what we're talking about is going to be how much alcohol is in a bottle. And unfortified wines are typically 5.5% to 16%. I'm not even going to tell you what the average, if you Google it, is, because I think that it's growing
fluctuated
so much. It's all over the place. A fortified wine ranges from 15.5 to 25% with an average of 18. And those are special. They're not the typical wines.
Just so that people can know what unfortified and fortified means, would you like to explain what that is?
Well, one is, I think the biggest thing is it's considered above that threshold of unfortified, and there is, generally speaking,
Like a port.
Yes, it's considered a liquor at that point. It's
Brandy.
not brandy. It's
Sherry.
It's moved away from being a wine, really, and it's in a different category. So the ABV of a wine indicates how much alcohol you're going to get per glass.
And you got to talk about a standard size glass too now.
So, and it is. So typical when you're looking at these, when they're talking about that standard, it's going to be a 5-ounce glass. Not
And-
your big guy. It's not going to be your big gulp, your glass that fits a whole bottle. No.
Well, and just so you guys have an idea, about one 750 milliliter bottle is equivalent to about 25 ounces, which is about 5 glasses per bottle. Okay.
And for most couples, that really, you're going to pour 2 each, and somebody's getting the generous side, or you're busting that 5 ounces when you've split the bottle between a
Right.
couple of people. So that ABV is about twice as much alcohol. So if you have a 5-ounce glass of wine with 16% ABV,
Which
versus,
are
which
like,
is
kind of like your big Zinfandels can get up to
big,
15,
bold
16,
cabs.
the big bold cabs. Those style wines generally have around 15. They're getting up there.
So if you're looking at that 15, 16% alcohol, and you want to compare it to a 5-ounce glass of, say, a lesser alcohol wine, or a grape that actually just at the end, when it becomes wine, holds more alcohol or less alcohol, that 7% ABV is a completely different glass of wine. It's twice as much alcohol. So that's where that ABV becomes very important, because if you're drinking a big bold cab that's 15.9% ABV, you're getting a lot more alcohol than you are if you're drinking a Vino Verde that's super light and doesn't have much alcohol at all for the whole bottle, versus the other bigger, bolder ones. So the question becomes to you, listener, is any of this important to you? What are you looking at when you're choosing your wines? And have you started to think about, well, is there sugar in my wine? Or is there alcohol? Or really, honestly, if you're thinking about it from a waistline standpoint, a lot of times it comes down to the calories, because a lot of people really think about calories. So that's why we're starting to see these things pop up on the shelves where it's a wine that's geared towards somebody who is thinking less calories.
Right.
And you get those by, you would think, low sugar, but we've kind of covered
Well,
that.
let me give people an idea, too, about why there's less calories in the Illuminate, too. It goes down to your macronutrients and how many calories are within those macronutrients. For carbs and protein, you have 4 calories per gram. For fat, you have 9 calories per gram. Alcohol is sometimes considered that 4th micronutrient, and you get 7 calories per gram. So that kind of gives you an idea. If you have an ABV that is 7%, it's going to have less calories in it than an ABV that is up towards the 15 and 16%, just because of the amount of alcohol in it. So that's where
it is a 1-for-1 on the calorie.
So that's why it ends up going down. And just to kind of give you an idea, I did do some math here. If you have the ABV on this regular one is 13%, the ABV on the Illuminate is 7%. The sugar is doubled in this one. It's
and
6%.
we'll explain that. The whole process of making wine number 2 is important, and it tells in the sugar level.
It does. Then the sugar on the regular one is 3 grams. This is 70 grams calories. Then the irregular one is 120, about that. So there's
a 50 calorie difference between the two.
Yes. So that tells you one bottle has 350, the lower 350 total calories. The other has about 600. So it depends on how much you're going to want to drink. But we'll kind of review that back at the end once we've tasted the Illuminate. But in the meantime, we want to figure out, how does this Illuminate end up becoming de-alcoholized, which that is a buzzword that you guys are probably going to start hearing, because so many of these wines are coming out more and more. So it's the de-alcoholization of the wine.
And that is what we're finding, and it's a very interesting thing that the market is demanding this. As these wines are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you saw the market shift to, and it really does become a result of the product that's coming out of the field. The grapes
let's go ahead and listen to Lee and see what he has to say about that.
Well, do we want to do that, or we want to have wine number 2 first?
Oh, man. So you're asking me wine or talk?
I think we need to try wine number 2 first, and then we'll hear what Lee has to say that helps us figure all of this out.
All right. Wine number 2. The coloring is almost exactly the same.
I think it's actually a little bit darker. You kind of even commented on that, which is interesting.
The nose is almost identical.
Well,
oops, sorry.
And you'll understand why. It's basically the same exact wine, just with less calories and less alcohol. It does smell less fragrant.
It may not be as intense. I think that's the intensity. The same aromas are there, but the intensity is not as strong.
Okay, can we taste it?
Yes. Oh, it still has the zip. Still all has the same flavor. Very interesting. Now I've got to compare while we're doing this.
I don't feel like it's much of a compromise. I can tell there's less of it. It's less intense. The intensity.
It's less intense,
but it's kind of in a pleasant way.
It's very nice. I mean, I don't know if I was handed that and told that it was not half the alcohol, I don't know if I would know it.
Not from drinking it. The little bit, I can say the burn is less. Mm-hmm. You can tell that burn that you get from alcohol is less. All right, so that de-alcoholization, let's have Lee come on and tell us what the market brought to, whether we asked him that. Did the market bring this, or did the demand of the market bring this? And he has a very good answer for that, and a good insight into this de-alcoholization and low alcohol. Let's listen. Hi, Lee.
Hey, ladies. How we doing?
Good. Our friendly distributor from Constellation here with Kim Crawford. It's great to have you on the show.
Hey, ladies, how we doing today?
Hey, welcome. We're so glad to have you on the show today.
Glad to be here. It's early in the day to be drinking some wine, but, we got to do what we're good at.
You got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we were so excited when we talked about having this episode is focused on the low sugar and the fermentation process, and we know that Kim Crawford has the Illuminate, which is lower sugar than the Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc. And our first thought was have Lee come on and tell us about these. And before we get into the differences between the two, I want to kind of address the demand in the marketplace and what brought this about.
Yeah, so I would say betterment is one of those categories that the supplier network and the distributor network get behind in a capacity much larger than the consumer base does. At first, if you go to any local store, retail establishment, you'll see that set keeps growing and growing and growing. It goes from just a couple of SKUs to 4 feet, 8 feet, and it's a product that customers are coming back and buying again and again. So we know they're very interested in it. The
Lee,
betterment
so it's
category.
it's
Betterment
called
is the
betterment.
category?
Yeah,
That's what we call it as a
betterment?
category. Yeah.
Okay.
And that really, you mentioned sugar. It's an interesting anomaly. The residual sugar in the Illuminate is 6 grams, where the residual sugar in the Kim Crawford is 3. So the sugar content is actually a little bit higher. However, calorically speaking, we're 70 calories per serving in the Illuminate and 7% alcohol. So it still fits that betterment category. It's also the #1 betterment SKU in the United States of America and South Carolina alike. So it's really found its foothold within this category, and it performs again and again and again. So we're really happy with it. It's doing good. And the category, like I said, keeps growing too. So you have a lot more options, which, ultimately is better it's like the cola wars. Everybody wins when both win. So.
Right. And I know that we just recently went to a store and they had, I guess, their betterment aisle, and I didn't know that was what it was called, but now I do. And I caught a reel, and I showed it our footage for a reel that we'll share this week on Instagram. And I showed Sandy, and I was like, look at how many there are, because it has. It's just all of a sudden it seems like overnight, but I'm sure for you it's not. There are just a bunch of them on the shelves.
We've definitely seen it explode since COVID, since 2020. I think this year, 2023, is estimated to be $3 billion in sales, and it's supposed to triple by 2028. That's early trends. Obviously, we'll wait and see. But the category itself, I really can comfortably say, is here to stay. I mean, it's like light beer. Nobody knew what light beer was, and then in the early 80s, it really took off, and it's now basically what everybody buys.
Pretty
That's your
much,
first
yeah.
go-to.
Yeah.
So do you think that is because of the low sugar or the low alcohol? Because when you just said that that the low alcohol actually has higher sugar, do you think the average consumer knows that it's not both low sugar? So that's what we're trying to help do here.
Sure.
So we're wanting to educate people on what the product actually is versus what they perceive it.
Right.
Sure.
So what do you perceive people buying? What do you think the average customer wants?
Well, obviously we're mandated by the alcohol, tobacco, firearm industry, so there's no caloric content on the back of a bottle of wine. If it's over 5% alcohol, it doesn't have to list that. So all we really have to offer is what we say on the front of the bottle. Now, the residual sugar, that gets kind of in wine dork talk, do you like it? Drink it. If you don't like it, don't. But be that as it may, what they do see is they see 70 calories and 7% alcohol. What we've seen is a trend where people want to enjoy their nights, enjoy our products, and enjoy them responsibly, and they can consume longer, have a longer time, and a bigger event with it if it's lower alcohol. So the calories, I think, really call out. But what we're seeing as far as what the consumer's telling us time and time again is the low alcohol is a nice alternative if they want to be able to enjoy our products for a longer period of time.
Well, I find that even very interesting because wine now is having a movement to no alcohol to low alcohol, yet you have craft beer that the alcohol ABV on them is just skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Your hardcore Napa cabs and your Zinfandels out there are still 15 and up to 16%, which is the max legal in our state. And you do get a lot of the really, really high tannic, high alcohol wines that are still quite popular. But they kind of live in a different category. They live in like our ultra premium and luxury category, where this actually, IRI speak, is super premium, which is the $10 to $15 range. And that consumer more regularly consumes the bottle of wine. They consume it a more daily event than the super luxury and luxury items, which would be a special event or a weekend. So you get more play, you get higher velocity with this price range. And then also with higher velocity comes more consumption, and the consumer tells us and is continuing to buy a product that doesn't have as much alcohol. So I think it's really, it's something that's working quite well. And have y'all had a chance to taste them?
Not yet. So
Okay.
once for the listener, yes, we'll have had one.
Okay.
Because what we're doing for our structure usually on the show is we do wine number one, and then we have the guest. Usually the guest is on, but because of taping purposes, we're putting you in the middle of the two wines.
Gotcha.
So we'll have tasted one, and then we'll taste the other, and it's a kind of a compare and contrast situation. So how about tell us the differences between the two? Is it my understanding is the goal was to make it not impact taste.
Yeah, so
Or
what
as
we
little
do
as
is
possible.
they're both the exact same wines. Kim Crawford, Marlborough County, it comes from, the 7 different subregions. We actually harvest and ferment and make each wine individually from each lot, and then we blend it together. The same exact wine goes into Illuminate. They go through, and you may have talked about this, or you may have experienced it or read about it, but the spinning cone method, where it's like a vacuum distillation, which brings the base wine alcohol, which again is just Kim Crawford's regular Sauvignon Blanc, down to 1%. And then what we do is our expert winemaker puts it back together, blends it with the regular to get around to 7%. And that's the goal, because what he's found, and you can read about this too, the spinning cone kind of has a slight effect on terroir. This is not it's not individual to us. When you do that, you lose something with the wine. But blending back in 40% of it with the regular Sauvignon Blanc, you grab the characteristics of the wine that, we so highly prize, and that makes it what it is and makes our consumers come back again. So the taste, I think you will get a little bit of a difference. But ultimately, when you put one beside the other, if you taste them side by side, you're going to just tell that you're going to still get a lot of the flavors and a lot of the really individual characteristics that make Kim Crawford so special. And then the low calorie, low alcohol, slightly different. And the color too, obviously our regular bottle, which I'm looking at on your table, is harder to see. But we have a clearer glass, but the pale color it's a little more pale greenish yellow. So you get a little different color, you get a little different character. It's just like I said with the light beer. Budweiser and Bud Light are going to taste different. However, they're both good quality products. This, I feel like with the expert blending that goes on, you can really, really, really have a light version that holds up.
So, and with Kim Crawford having such good success, in the numbers you shared with us seem to indicate good success, what other products are we soon to see having a similar, using this spinning process and having an alternative? You think a lot?
Honestly, we have, I think, 4 SKUs now, or 4 brands that are going to low cal. We haven't really drilled in on exactly how we're making them low calorie. The spinning cone is something we've kind of touted with Kim Crawford. You can do it. They've done it with other items outside of wine too. I don't really know how we're actually getting low cal on our other items, because that's not really something we press. But I feel like they found a lot of success with it in this item, and it's something we're happy to tout. The tech sheets I shared with you guys, it's like one of the first things it says is like we use a spinning cone to make the alcohol less. And it's something that I feel like if it's as successful, like I said earlier too, that's the #1 betterment SKU in the U.S. There's doing something right. If the consumer's buying it that much, we're doing it the right way.
Definitely. Right. We actually interviewed a non-alcoholic wine that uses the spinning cone called Sip Clean.
Okay.
And they use Bev Zero, which is the #1 spinning cone
production method.
Production method. Actually has they actually have the machine. They sell the machines.
Okay.
And there is a video that will pop into this video so that our listeners can see and hear it too.
Nice.
That because it does. They actually take it all the way down to less than 1. Yeah. Well, it's close to 0.
Well, they're marketing
they can as non-alcoholic, but it still has the taste and feel of alcohol. But this is a little bit
wine.
Of wine. But this is a little bit different. So we're really excited to be able to compare these.
Yeah. I would say I would definitely drink the regular Kim Crawford first, so you can get the flavors and like I said, you really get an essence of Marlborough County juice and how it plays and how it lives on the palate. It's really bright, really grapefruit. There's just a lot of really bold upfront flavors, and then go to the other one. And then if you have a chance, do it in reverse later, just to kind of see how it comes back, and you'll really get an interesting characteristic taste, and you'll see how it. I mean, it really does. It performs. So
I always love science experiments with wines. I can't wait to do this.
We're in.
yeah, you get to drink it twice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Darn.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Lee, for joining us and giving us an insight about these two wines in particular, but also the industry itself and what the demand that's surrounding these low alcohol wines.
Sure. Yeah. Number one Sauv Blanc in the U.S., guys. So
Woo-woo.
drink it up and enjoy it, and come by it again.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
So Lee kind of blew our mind with that whole betterment category. We knew there was something happening, and then we were like, "Oh, there's a name for it."
We just couldn't put a word with what was happening. So it's always great to name something.
And that whole process, the spinning cone method that he described and that we talked about, that is that de-alcoholization, and it basically, it's a low temperature vacuum steam distillation, and it's really like what? But it's when you want to remove alcohol from a wine. One of the concerns, if you went to that simple distill, is applying heat, and we know heat on a wine just is no bueno, right?
Right.
So the spinning cone allows that to kind of happen in an inverted way. I don't know how to express it, but basically it does that with a low temperature vacuum steam, so that you still get the distillation, but you don't get the temperature fluctuation.
And it
really
removes those aromas and tries to leave all the other stuff, and then they put it all together. So there's a couple of different ways that people can create that low alcohol wine. And I do find it very interesting that the Kim Crawford brand decided to take the exact same wine and mix it with that de-alcoholized, blend it. I do think that's why it has retained that same flavor profile, because of the way they have blended it instead of trying to recreate it with additional additives, which is what some winemakers end up doing. Is especially if they make a non-alcoholic wine, they try to add in additives to try to make it taste the same way. We actually even did an episode
52 of Wines to Find.
Yes, episode 52 was on during a dry January of 2021, and it talked about the de-alcoholization of wine and how they do that.
Complete de-alcoholization.
Yes.
And what we're seeing actually is there's such a demand in the market for either low alcohol or even no alcohol. And that was one of the reasons why we had the Bev Zero folks on, is because, and the Sip Clean folks on, is we wanted to kind of delve into that way back in 2 years ago. And now you can see it's just growing and growing and growing. And that, I don't think it's going anywhere. So I think we're going to have to settle in and find out.
I think one of the big things that really shocked me whenever we were talking with Lee is that I thought people really wanted low sugar wines, and it's really the low alcohol that that people are wanting and looking for, because I think that a lot of people do realize that to have things fermented, you are going to eat up the sugar. So that having that no sugar wine, I think or no sugar or low sugar on wine labels, I do think the average consumer is actually seeing through that as misinformation. So that I'm very happy about, because I was actually like, why do they keep putting this label on wines? Do people know that it's not right? But I think it's really the lower alcohol that people are looking for.
And so as the consumer, if you are thinking that you want a lower sugar diet, in you're looking at your alcohol or your wine consumption, you may want to convert that language to lower alcohol. Look and pay strong attention to the ABV on that back of that label,
because then that actually converts to calories.
Correct. Right. So we hope that has been an insight. And we hope that you are following along on the how to fit wine into your lifestyle, and that you have considered how those do, how these things are factoring in. And we hope we're being helpful to you. But we do want to go ahead and compare these wines and tell you our thoughts on them, because it is the same exact wine, just with less alcohol.
Exactly. All right. So let's go ahead and do wine number one. I have bought this so many different times.
It's got to be a 5.
Yeah,
or a
it's
4.
got to be a 5. I would never go buy. Well, I would. I think if I had a party, I would buy a case if I was serving Sauvignon Blanc. So yes, I would give this a 5.
And I would give it a 4.5. I like it, but I don't know that I would
Well, I'm
go that
thinking
far.
I would not have a whole case of it in my cellar. I would, but I have bought it on so many different repeats that it ended up being a 5. I probably bought a case. Then the Illuminate. I am really shocked at how it tastes very, very similar. It does not have the same extra little heat on the background, which ends up making the mouthfeel just a little bit different too. But I'm going to give this one, I'm probably going to give it well, okay, now this goes, hold on. Now I've got to think here. Because one of my goals whenever I start looking at wines that I want to buy is I want low intervention. Having a spinning cone is not necessarily low intervention. If that's the only process, then that's fine. But that's something that I would equate into my wine purchasing decision. I personally think I would go ahead and buy the regular Kim Crawford versus the Illuminate, just because it has an extra step. I would just drink 2 glasses instead of 4 glasses is probably what I would end up doing in reality. So I guess I would say this one's a 4 for me.
Okay. And I'm pleasantly surprised. I'd probably give it a 4 or a 4.5 as well. It is definitely less alcohol. It tastes less alcohol. And I think that for people, especially...
But that's not a bad thing.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. So for me, if I'm thinking, I really want to watch those alcohol, not just the calories, but the would itself, I would lean towards this one.
So it's dependent.
It is dependent. And I do think that spinning cone method, it is low intervention, I think, because it is another step, but they're not adding anything in. There are other ways to get to that same point.
I guess anytime you do something, it's an intervention.
It is. And it's a next step. It's additional, and it's not as true to, but it's a compromise for the less
So you have to
alcohol.
decide, do you want the less alcohol? Is that worth it to you? You have to decide for yourself. And if it's a hot summer day and you're out by the pool, I may end up saying, you know what? The Illuminate may be a better choice for me that day.
And like Lee said, that's the demand. People want to be able to drink more of it, and they're looking at these bottles of wine that keep getting more and more, and they're going, I can only really have a glass.
Yeah.
So it is a good alternative. So there you go. It's almost it is distinguishable, but it's almost indistinguishable in the taste.
It's very
difference.
close. I think if you were not side by side tasting and somebody just handed you the Illuminate, I think it would be very hard for you to tell.
Very illuminating. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this. We hope if you did and you wanted to do your own experiment and you'd try it on these 2 bottles, it's a fun one to do. We hope if you loved it, you would share it with your wine-loving friend or family member and start thinking about being more intentional with those wine purchases and continue to listen to our series. Next week, by the way, is going to be sustainability. We're talking about wines that are made sustainably and telling you what that means. And the 2 wines that we're trying are M. Rosé and Peter Paul
Yes.
Red Blend. And we hope you'll join us next time on Wines to Find.